Let's now look briefly at how organizational culture gets to shape practice. Last week, we introduced this critical question of what people wish they had known before starting their placement. And you saw a few colleagues really stepping in and sharing their own experiences, but also yourselves have been able to contribute to this conversation on what you wish you had known before entering the practice you are currently doing. And people wrote really very interesting comments. You can see people writing, for example, that what they wished they had known would be what are the main people they should be in contact with and ask for help from. And that's a very important element of organizational culture. Uh, I don't really want to go into the details, but you can think of this and being in that organization where you feel like you don't have enough sense of who should be the exact person you go to whenever, you feel like you want supervision or some guidance on how things are done. And that's in itself an important aspect of culture. Other people said things such as how long it takes to understand the organization and all the complexities within it. I think we've spoken already about the complexity of organizational culture. And again, this is clearly exemplifying that. People talked about ways to set realistic expectations for people who expect certain things from our service that we do not provide due to funding constraints and organizational rules. I think I like the idea of organizational rules here, and I would be glad to know what these organizational rules are. But I suspect already these organizational rules will be reflecting key elements of organizational culture. You can see it coming together already, what I started talking to previously about the complexity of organizational culture. People said many other things. How unstructured direct practice can be, the structure of who does what in the organization, and the different teams in the building. So again, that's a key element of organizational culture. So I decided to include this Padlet here to start reminding us of how these key topics we are discussing are interconnected, and more importantly, how they align with your placement experience. I tried my best to draw a mind map of these ideas and how they reflect really different cultural perspectives across different organizations. You can see clearly that some of these organizations are team oriented. Clearly, people are talking about teams. Others are people oriented. How do you deal with clients? How do you deal with people, facing visa issues and so on and so forth? But others might be quite oriented to attention to details. Other organizations will be very much valuing innovations. Others will be a little bit aggressive, and that's something which is not uncommon to experience in some organizations. Others will be quite outcome oriented. So people speaking about key performance indicators here. And all these are, again, key aspects of how organizational culture gets to really shape our practice. Very important consideration for us to start looking at. Now, Whiteley, who's an important, scholar on these notions of organizational culture, suggests that each worker is actually a member not only of one organizational culture, but of three, at least three types of organizational subcultures. One of these subcultures is the broader organizational culture itself, with the overall vision and mission statement of that organization. But the second is the group or team or department to which you belong as a worker. And the third is the personal culture which the worker themselves bring to the organization. Now, more importantly, is how these three key dimensions of organizational culture get to intersect to shape workers' motivation, to shape also even communication patterns, to shape decision making, to shape role expectations, and the tensions and conflict resolution styles in different workplaces. So another way of looking at how really organizational culture gets to shape practice. And because human service organizations rely heavily on relationships and even emotions and ethical judgment, the different subcultures I'm unpacking here really become the most powerful influence on practice, and often more than the policies or even the mission statement and the procedures in place. You'll see that in the organizations where you are working, there are things you are really doing, not because you read them somewhere in the policies, but simply because you asked a senior colleague, and that senior colleague was generous to share tips on how they have been handling things over time in a specific area of practice. So organizational culture is also interlinked with organizational performance and even job satisfaction among workers. So an important consideration here really is how even the notion of competency itself can be quite interlinked with organizational culture. And in that sense, it is sometimes and in many cases socially and culturally and even structurally constructed. You might work in an organization where you bring very good social work skills and are really specializing in child protection, very good case manager, but maybe you don't have, you simply are not comfortable with, I don't know, running family group meetings. And that might be one of the competencies which they value. And they might end up labeling you as incompetent simply because of you not having one of the skills they expected you to be having. And or maybe you have it, but not exactly what they are looking for. So this in itself really problematizes the way we think about organizations and workplace culture. So what counts as good practice in one agency might not be exactly what the other agency is looking for. What counts as good performance for one team might not be exactly what another team is really looking for. What competencies, people are looking for in the HR team might not be what they are looking for, I don't know, in the direct prac team. And you have to be really cautious and, ready to understand that. So organizational culture has the potential to enhance organizational performance, and I'll explain in a bit what organizational performance means, but also it gets to shape job satisfaction among the workers and the sense of certainties about how problems are to be handled. So organizational culture also serves as a control mechanism to channel behavior towards desired behaviors and to prevent undesired behavior across different organizations. It directly causes workplace issues and drives success and failures. So many of the workplace issues sometimes we experience when we are entering a new organization, sometimes they have nothing to do with us. Sometimes these work issues have nothing to do with the clients we work with, but in many cases, they will have something to do with the features of the organization. And the culture in that organization is an important determinant of many of the issues we experience. Issues such as poor decision making, poor communication, ethical lapse, all those can be part of the organizational culture, and in many ways, they can get to cause us trouble in the kind of practice we are really doing. So Holds Alex and Tom wrote this very thought-provoking article, which tries to theorize these notions of organizational culture and how it gets actually to shape performance in human service context. Really encourage you to read this and start embracing this learning opportunity. So, in terms of organizational culture, performance, and job satisfaction, actually, there are many ways of looking at it, but two key considerations. High performance is when the organizational culture is effective and can be accepted by the employee. And this can lead to greater motivations for employees and can increase their productivity and therefore can be linked to good performance. But when the culture actually is part of the problem, then the culture of the organization is not proper and it's not transparent, or it has, other problems which you might think of. And in that case, it's not simply accepted by the employee, and that can lead to employees not being motivated, and that in itself can really get to shape poor performance and lower job satisfaction among employees. So there are these correlations, and you really need to consider them and see what is that in the organization where you are working, which you think is part of the organizational culture, but which you feel like is facilitating you to be a good social worker at your work or to do your job, to deliver the best possible outcome. And what is that which you feel like is preventing your work in many ways, wherever you work, and how can you start challenging or addressing that? Thank you very much, and see you in the next recording.